It's the 30th of June, 1559. Things go terribly wrong on this day. Henry II, King of France, was celebrating the conclusion of the Italian Wars and the marriage of his daughter to Philip II, King of Spain. To show off his virility, he decided to personally participate in a joust. As his opponent's lance fragmented upon contact, a shard of wood penetrated King Henry's visor and impacted itself straight through his eye and into his brain. This became the first act in a tragedy to last 3 generations. After Henry's death, his son Francis II, a frail boy of 15, is next in line. As fate had it, his uncles, Francois, the Duke of Guise, and Charles of Guise, the Cardinal of Lorraine, were exactly in the right place and at the right time to take advantage of this. The Guise were originally from Lorraine and entered French service in the time of Francis I. They served France with distinction, however their main merit is their marriage into the Scottish royal house, allies of France since time immemorial. Mary, Queen of Scots, their niece, is wife to Francis II, the current King of France. Thus, the Guise, who are already powerful, are propelled to the most prominent position. After Henry's death, they deftly persuade the young king to let them manage his affairs, and use this power to isolate him from the rest of the court. Catherine of Medici, the Queen Mother, is separated from her son. Anne de Montmorency, a veteran of the Italian Wars, who used to be the number 1 at court, is sent away. Antoine of Navarre from the House of Bourbons, a prince of the blood directly related to the Valois kings of France, and who thus should be the number 1 at court, is sent on a fool's errand to the south. Louis of Bourbon, Prince of Conde, Navarre's brother, and Gaspard de Coligny, Admiral of France and nephew of Montmorency, are also sidelined. But court intrigue is only part of the story. Religion, or rather ideology, makes the Guises' usurpation of power especially unacceptable. By 1559, France is already spiraling out of control. Protestantism had reached France as early as 1519. However, it had been preceded by humanism that acted as a moderating force. Francis I, a materialistically minded man, condoned it, failing to recognize its significance. Thus Protestantism spread, quietly and in an innocuous manner. Things changed forever with the affair of the placards. On the morning of the 18th of October 1534, the people of Paris and a number of large cities were greeted by placards laid out in strategic places by radical Protestants. The placards condemned the Catholic Mass and said that those partaking in it, meaning pretty much everyone, were corrupt, dumb, and forsaken to hell. Moreover, they contained mild criticism of the king. Worst of all, one of these placards was found nailed to the door of the king's bedchamber. Francis knew sedition when he saw it, and to the great delight of the offended masses, he declared a war on heresy. Those believed responsible for the affront were swiftly burned at the stake. Persecution became nationwide, as Protestants either went underground or fled France altogether. One of those fleeing was a young lawyer by the name of John Calvin. Calvin first fled to Basel, then headed to Strasbourg, and finally settled in Geneva. Here he formulated his doctrine, taking elements from both Luther and Zwingli. What makes his version of Protestantism particularly potent is Calvin's concern with worldly issues. Unlike Luther, Calvin believed that the state should be subordinated to the church's moral desires. After he gained control of Geneva, Calvin implemented his plan, purging the city of all vices, replacing them with virtue and industry. Needless to say, this inspired many, most notably the upwardly mobile middle classes of the ever-expanding cities. But it wasn't only the middle classes who were converted. This new strain of Protestantism also inspired the highest ranks of French society, most notably the Admiral Gaspard de Coligny and the Prince of Conde. Opposing them are the Guise, the champions of Catholicism in France. Their power is a direct threat to men such as Conde and Coligny. Already during the reign of Henry II, persecution of heretics intensified, and now with the Guise in charge, there is serious talk of introducing a Spanish-style Inquisition. But even though merely being a Protestant is punishable by death, Protestantism keeps growing and growing. Calvin had originally built his power on exiles from France. Now hundreds and thousands of these exiles are returning to France as Calvinist preachers. By 1560, it's estimated that 2 million out of France's population of 16 million are Protestants. As the repression increases throughout 1559, there are more and more calls for something to be done. Aside from questions of belief, the government of the Guise is increasingly unpopular on other fronts too. After 6 decades of fighting the Habsburgs for supremacy, France is bankrupt beyond belief. The national debt amounts to 4 times the yearly income, and many soldiers and functionaries haven't been paid in years. Banditry and crime skyrocket. This is when a group of Protestants decide to take the law into their own hands. Their plan calls for a small group of elite soldiers to descend on the court, disarm the guards, arrest the Guise, and take the king under their protection. But as the plan progresses, the number of participants in the plot also keeps swelling. Inevitably, people start to talk, and the authorities find out. Alarmed by this, Catherine of Medici attempts to propose concessions. But the plot is already underway, as thousands of suspicious persons gather around Amboise, where the court is residing. Being well prepared, the Guise offer a robust response, rounding up most of the conspirators. To Catherine's urging, the king offers them clemency in return for peace. But a few days later, the plotters try again. This time, the Guise are given a free hand. 1,200 Protestants are hunted down and put to death. Contrary to expectations, this only makes things worse. Protestants start to arm themselves. Violent insurrections and riots break out all across France. The worst cases are in the Occitan region in the south, the heartland of the Bourbons. This is not surprising, since centuries ago this was the land of the Cathars, and later the Waldensians. But other regions also side with the Protestants. All the way from Lyon through Provence, through the Loire Valley and into Normandy, countless towns and cities side with the Protestants. This Calvinist crescent is opposed by the eastern regions of France and the city of Paris, strongholds of the Guise and staunchly Catholic. When civil war seems almost inevitable, Catherine of Medici and her party called the Politiques step onto the scene. According to their detractors, the Politiques are Machiavellians and opportunists. However, Catherine and her acolytes believe that anything is better than war. When the old chancellor dies, Catherine nominates her man, Michel de l'Hôpital, to the post. To the ire of the Guise, l'Hôpital suspends the persecution of Protestants pending a national religious council that would decide the direction of religious matters. This makes a lot of sense, taking into account France's special position within the church. Unlike in Tudor England, the French monarchs already have extensive control over the church. The king nominates the bishops and archbishops, who are usually his clientele, allowing the monarchy to pilfer the church's extensive resources and set the agenda almost at will. With such control, moderate reforms implemented by a strong king would be the logical step. But with a boy king in charge and the monarchy in disarray, this proves to be an impossible task. To counter the Queen Mother's centrism, the Guise moved to undermine the Protestant side. In October, the Prince of Conde is arrested on suspicion of taking part in the Conspiracy of Amboise. In spite of the evidence being merely circumstantial, the Guise plan to condemn Conde for sedition and have him executed as soon as possible. But events again take a radical turn. On the 5th of December 1560, Francis II dies of an ear infection after a mere 17 months on the throne. As he had no children, he's followed by his brother Charles IX, who is only 10 years old. As Francis's death had not been sudden as in the case of Henry, Catherine of Medici had ample time to prepare. As soon as her second son is crowned, she sidelines the Guise and assumes governorship herself. To give this move legitimacy, she invites Antoine de Bourbon, the King of Navarre, to act as co-regent. Navarre himself is leaning towards Protestantism, however officially he is still Catholic. The Kingdom of Navarre, his rightful domain, had been annexed by Spain during the Italian Wars. By allying himself with the moderate Catholics, he naively hopes that Philip II will return his kingdom. Conde is also included in the government, after all charges against him are dropped. Anne de Montmorency is also courted by Catherine, who uses his personal animosity with the Duke of Guise to get him on board. Thus the Guise and their radical Catholic party are almost entirely removed from power. With this new impetus, L'Hôpital proposes a national religious council to settle matters of the faith, and an Estates Générales, the assembly of the French Parliament, to remedy the kingdom's finances. Of these two, the religious council proves to be the most problematic. The Council of Trent is already underway, therefore the Pope tries everything to prevent this, fearing a repetition of the English Reformation of Henry VIII. Nonetheless, both events are underway by autumn 1561. At the Estates Générales, it's decided that the church will voluntarily surrender a great deal of its income and property to the king, giving a critical lifeline to the bankrupt monarchy. The religious council, the Colloquy of Poissy, proves to be much less successful. Charles of Guise, Cardinal of Lorraine, proposes that the Calvinist Protestants adopt the Lutheran Confession of Augsburg as a basis for a compromise. Being intransigent, the Protestants refuse this, insisting that Calvinism should simply be allowed to coexist side by side with the established faith. The talks collapse, but Catherine is undismayed. As a private initiative, she convenes a small group of moderate Catholics and moderate Protestants to hammer out a compromise, whatever it takes. A compromise of sorts is eventually achieved. By the Edict of January, the Protestants are given unprecedented liberties. They are now allowed to freely attend services anywhere excluding Paris, provided they congregate outside city limits in a makeshift place that may not be a church. In return, they must promise to lay down arms and keep the peace. This measure is meant to be only temporary, pending the results of the Council of Trent. But in spite of this liberal compromise, things only get worse. Neither Catholics nor Protestants are happy with the settlement, each wanting more at the expense of the other. Protestants become more brazen, as radical Calvinist exiles from Geneva and Germany flood into the country. In some places where Protestants are the majority, Catholics are unceremoniously evicted from their church. In other places, Protestants engage in violent acts of iconoclasm, scandalizing mainstream public opinion. Even in staunchly Catholic Paris, Protestants are openly practicing their faith, proselytizing without regard for the majority. This is too much for moderate Catholics such as Montmorency. Putting aside his personal differences, he joins the Duke of Guise and the Marshal Saint-André to form the Triumvirate, a militant Catholic alliance designed to combat heresy. Their greatest ally in this is Philip II, King of Spain. Philip faces the same problem in the Low Countries, the richest of his provinces. If France were to descend into Calvinism, it's feared that the Netherlands will also explode in a Protestant rebellion. Therefore, the Catholic party is assured that as soon as they make up their mind to crush the Calvinists, Spain's vast military resources will be at their disposal. The Protestants also attempt to find allies abroad. Their champion is Elizabeth I, the Protestant Queen of England. They also make inroads to the Protestant princes of Germany. However, their position is much more difficult, as Elizabeth is ever cautious to intervene. Likewise, the German princes, in spite of having inexhaustible numbers of mercenaries after the Schmalkaldic Wars, lack the money to engage in decisive action. This is the precarious situation in France at the beginning of 1562. Civil war is almost a certainty. All that is needed is a spark to ignite the fire. This casus belli finally comes on the 1st of March 1562. On this day, a group of Protestants gather to worship in a barn outside the small town of Vassy. They are not doing anything illegal, however where they do it is far more problematic. Vassy is only a stone's throw from Joinville, the headquarters of the Guise. When the Duke of Guise arrives to Vassy with a large retinue, a scuffle ensues between his men and the Protestants. The scuffle turns into a skirmish, and the skirmish turns into a massacre. The Protestant civilians are no match for the Duke's men-at-arms, and a great number of them are mercilessly cut down. By now, this is nothing out of the ordinary in France. What makes this massacre special is the media frenzy that follows it. From Germany to Spain, countless numbers of pamphlets are printed by each side, claiming the other was responsible for the massacre. 2 weeks later, when the Duke of Guise arrives in Paris, he is welcomed as a hero. The scandalized Catholic masses side with him to the last man. Sometime later, Conde also attempts to enter Paris at the head of 3,000 horsemen. However, by this time, Paris already resembles an armed camp. The king and the queen mother are at Fontainebleau at this time. Catherine still hopes to calm the situation, but her pleas fall on deaf ears. Several massacres of Protestants occur throughout France, and this only escalates the situation further. Realizing that war is inevitable, Conde races to Fontainebleau to secure the king. However, the Catholics get there first and carry away the young king and his court to Paris. Seeing this, the Protestants elect Conde as their leader, with Coligny as his deputy. The Huguenots arm themselves and repel to Orléans, the largest city of the Loire Valley, and begin to provision themselves for a long war. Thus begins the First French War of Religion.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, it helps with the algorithm. Check out my Patreon if you want to help me on this journey. Links down below.